Welcome to The Explainer. So, think about the world around you for a second. Are churches, temples, and mosques getting emptier? I mean, are we becoming a less religious society? Today, we're going to dig into one of the biggest questions sociologists have been wrestling with. Is religion actually on its way out?
And that is the central question, isn't it? Is religion disappearing? This has been at the heart of a massive debate for like over a century. And you know what? The answer isn't a simple yes or no. It's way more complicated. It's really a story of decline, sure, but also of transformation and, believe it or not, some pretty surprising resilience.
Okay, so to really get into this, we need to know the key term everyone throws around, secularization. All it really means is the process where religious influence starts to shrink in modern societies. You know, the classic ideas that as we get more modern, more scientific, religion just kind of fades into the background. But the real question, the one that's causing all the debate, is it actually fading away or is it just changing its shape?
All right, let's start with the first side of the argument. This is the classic take, the one that says, yep, religion is absolutely disappearing. And to be honest, when you first look at the evidence for this, it tells a pretty powerful story. So the folks who argue for a decline, they usually point to evidence in three key areas. First, you've got the institutional side. Religion is just losing its power in public life. Then there's the practical side. Fewer and fewer people are actually showing up. And finally, the ideological part. The core beliefs themselves seem to be getting weaker, challenged like never before.
So let's talk about public life. I mean, think about it. A few hundred years ago, who ran the schools, the hospitals, the social safety nets? It was the church. But today, all of those jobs belong to the state. Religion has basically been pushed out of the public square and into our private lives. And check out this number from the UK. Over the last 100 years, even as the population was booming, the number of full-time professional clergy actually dropped by a whopping 25%. That's a really clear sign that the institution itself is shrinking. And you see this shift in our personal lives too. Just look at weddings. Back in the 19th century, if you were getting married, it was pretty much a given it'd be a religious ceremony. We're talking like 95% of the time. But today, wow, that number has absolutely plummeted, down to about a third. And then you have the battle of ideas. For centuries, religion was the go-to for all the big questions in life. But now, science has stepped in with its own really powerful explanations for, everything, from how the universe started to how our own bodies work. And that just leaves less and less room for supernatural answers. Sociologist Steve Bruce, he doesn't mince words. He basically argues that our modern values, things like individualism and personal choice, are just fundamentally at odds with the kind of authority that traditional religion demands. So from his point of view, this decline isn't just some passing trend, it's inevitable.
So there you have it. Seems pretty straightforward, right? Case closed. Religion's on its way out. But what if we've been looking at this all wrong? What if we've been measuring the wrong things? There's a whole other camp of sociologists who argue that the real story isn't about disappearance at all. It's about transformation.
Okay, let's flip this around and explore that other side of the coin. This is the idea that religion isn't dying, it's just changing. It's finding new ways to exist in our modern world. And this is where things get really, really interesting. It turns out that this whole story of religious decline, it's pretty much a story about Western Europe. The sociologist Peter Berger pointed out that if you look almost anywhere else, the United States, huge parts of Africa, Latin America, religion is either stable or, in some cases, it's actually growing. This decline thing, it is definitely not a global phenomenon. So this just opens up a ton of fascinating questions, right? Like, what if the decline we're seeing is only in those big, mainstream, kind of accommodating churches? What if more strict fundamentalist groups are actually thriving? And maybe, just maybe, we're too obsessed with counting people in pews when the real action is happening inside people's heads, in their private beliefs. And that leads us to this really cool concept called believing without belonging. The idea is basically that millions of people out there still have religious beliefs, they're still spiritual, they just don't feel the need to belong to a traditional church or go to a service every week. For them, faith has become this private, personal thing, not some kind of public performance. So this all brings us to a couple of really interesting modern theories that try to explain why these patterns are happening. Why does religion seem to be thriving in some places and fading in others? Because it's clearly not as simple as more modern equals less religious.
Okay, one of the most influential ideas completely reframes the whole debate. It's called religious market theory, and it basically asks us to stop thinking about religion as just a social tradition and start thinking about it like like a competitive marketplace. You've got different faiths acting like businesses, all trying to win over customers. Now, this theory totally flips the old way of thinking on its head. It argues that competition is actually good for religion. Think about it. When all these different groups have to compete for followers, they can't just be lazy. They have to innovate, they have to improve their product, and they have to really cater to what people are looking for. So, more choice doesn't lead to confusion and decline, it leads to more engagement.
And this theory gives us a great way to understand the difference between, say, the United States and the United Kingdom. The US has this huge, diverse religious marketplace with no official state church, and what do you see? Higher levels of participation. The UK, on the other hand, has a dominant state church and historically less choice, and you see lower participation. It fits the model perfectly. But hold on, what if the key isn't about competition at all? What if it's about comfort? There's another huge theory called existential security theory, and it argues that religion has less to do with choice and more to do with how much we feel we need a safety net, protection from all the dangers and uncertainties of life.
So, according to this theory, in places where life is pretty predictable and safe, think about wealthy Scandinavian countries with really strong social safety nets, religion just isn't as necessary, and its appeal goes down. But in places where people face constant risk, poverty, and uncertainty, well, religion remains absolutely vital. And this also explains that weird paradox of the US. It's a super wealthy country, right? But it also has high inequality and a weaker safety net, which creates a lot of insecurity for a lot of people. And that, the theory says, is what drives its high levels of religious participation. Okay, so we've gone through all these theories, all these statistics. What's the big takeaway here? I mean, beyond being an interesting academic debate, why does any of this actually matter to us?
Well, it really comes down to this powerful idea from Peter Berger called the sacred canopy. Just imagine a giant shared roof over all of society, a protective shield that shelters us from chaos and a sense of, meaninglessness. For most of human history, religion was that canopy. It was the single, shared story that answered the biggest questions and gave life a sense of purpose.
And that's really the core question of this whole debate. In our modern world, with all its scientific explanations, its mix of global cultures, and its intense focus on the individual, is that sacred canopy starting to fray? Is that single protective shield beginning to tear? Are we as a society losing that shared universe of meaning? So, what this whole debate really shows us is that religion isn't just vanishing, it's evolving, it's changing. And that leaves us with a huge question for our own future. As these old institutions and old ways of believing continue to change, where are we going to turn to find community, to find purpose, to find answers to those huge questions? What will our sacred canopy even look like in the decades to come?